Members of the Pensioner Bondholders Forum are insisting government must explicitly announce the exemption from the domestic debt exchange program, else they will continue picketing the Ministry of Finance. This is coming at a time government of Ghana has announced the completion of the program. Government says the DDEP closed on Friday, February 10, with over 80% participation. The statement released Monday stated that the ministry has been able to achieve some 85% participation in that DDEP program, and that it was a voluntary process which they continuously made people aware of that particular one. Well, for former Chief Justice Sophia Ekufo, she describes that as cheap talk, the government's pledge to honor the bond of persons who have self-exempted. The former Chief Justice attended Tuesday's picketing to updrum home pensioners' demand for a total exemption from the debt exchange program. To her, this is not a promise government can keep. She has also directly hit at Ghc Asariotridako for taking a swipe at her for a recent comment. There's more in the following report. On Monday, these pensioners had one last hope that the finance minister will pronounce them exempted from the domestic debt exchange program. But government, in its latest statement Tuesday morning, rather reiterated its unflinching stance that participation in the domestic debt exchange program remains voluntary. Convener of the group, Dr. Edu Anani Entry, says they deserve a response from government.
Why didn't the government tell the pension funds that just opt out, it is voluntary, just opt out and I'll pay you your bonds? Why didn't the government tell the medical people just opt out, become a self-exempt person and I'll pay you your. The government or the minister knows that there's a difference between the issuer exempting you and you exempting yourself. When the issuer exempts you, he has added responsibility because you were not part of the bonds that the issuer says he may not be able to service. So that is where we want to be, that we want the issuer to exempt us. Now the issuer has gotten the 80%, so he's going ahead with the program.
Reacting to the statement, the former Chief Justice Sophia Ekufo registered her disappointment at why government is finding it difficult to respond to their request.
A few days ago, similar letters that had been written to the minister have been responded to, whereby he has categorically exempted other groups. Why? And you know, when I cannot fathom the reason for something being done in a particular way, especially when it's been done for others, but it's not being done for others, I start getting suspicious. I've grown to be to the age where I've seen it all, and therefore I easily become suspicious.
She also reacted to Gabi Asariotiridako's tweet, which sought to downplay the essence of her involvement in the protest.
No, he can decide on. He doesn't decide for me what I need to do and what I do not need to do. It's as simple as that. I don't have time for things like that. People like that are not important to me or to my life. It's a disturbance. That's all I've got to say about it. Listen, sticks and stones may break my bones, but blah blah will not hurt me. No, and insult is the weapon of the pin-brained. That's all I've got to say. I'm not going to trade words with pin brains. I'm sorry.
She says government's continuous resistance to make the call is an affront to the image of the country.
The word bond is not used as a casual term. Bond means tied to. My word is my bond. Yes. And when a government's bond can be tossed up and down, the tides like that, flip-flop, that's a serious thing. For me, my problem with this whole thing is the destruction of the image of this nation, and something that is being done which will last for generations. It took a long time before normal Ghanaians would even buy anything that is government, because there was always the suspicion, tomorrow you don't know what will happen.
The group continues to appeal to government to exempt them from the program.
GMA has received such a letter. TUC Pensioner Funds, UTAC has received such a letter. So we are waiting to receive that letter saying that we have been exempted from this DDEP.
We have already written seeking the exemption. So if he comes to make the press conference, I believe he will first have to talk to us before he talks to them, before he goes to the world. If I write to you and you decide to respond, you respond to me before you respond to the world. So it will mean he will write to us and then make a press conference and say, I have even written. And I believe that's why, if he decides to have a press conference, I believe he will do that. He will write.
The pensioner bondholders resume tomorrow to continue their protest. James Kwesi Aveji's report read to you. So with the people who opted not to be part of the DDEP, what is the assurance that government can honor its obligations? Isaac Kofi of our research desk has been checking the data and joins me in studio with more. Kofi. What do we know about this particular assurance from government?
Well, so if you look at the touch screen right now, this is the bingo moment for government. It wanted 80% or more. Now we are learning that government has achieved more than 80%, 85% participation rate. And mind you, currently the debt that government actually targeted, or the bonds that they wanted to restructure, was around 97 billion. And they were able to now get the participation of about 83 billion of that 97 billion of those bonds. It's about 85% participation rate.
Okay.
This is the stage that they wanted to reach. This was the rate that government wanted to see, so that they can term this domestic debt exchange as successful. So as we speak, Finance Ministry, they've actually announced the domestic debt exchange as successful.
Okay.
But they are promising, or they are actually assuring bondholders who could not participate in this exchange that they will go ahead to honor, their obligation in actually paying out coupons. Okay. And then also, if your bonds mature, probably government to pay. But the assurance is actually conditioned on something. You get it?
Okay.
So if you look at the first assurance that was given to individual bondholders, they say you can self-exempt. That is the word that they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear self-exemption. They want to hear the same word that you gave to the pension funds, that total exemption. Don't tell us self-exemption, because you've already told us that if you self-exempt, I cannot assure you of the tradability of your bonds. So now let's look at the second slide. If you look at the target, the initial target was 137 billion Ghana cedis. Okay. 137 billion cedis of bonds that government wanted to restructure. As we speak, this has been revised from 137 to 97.7 billion cedis. So huge. The difference is about 40 billion cedis. Now the question is, the key question is, the 40 billion cedis that has been exempted, if you look at pension funds, and if you look at individual bondholders, if you combine these two, I am not sure it will cater for this 40 billion cedis. So we are asking the question, is it a government is, Nicodemus was secretly exempting some people? We want to find out. Government must give us the reason why we see this huge difference, because the initial bond was 137 billion, and now we are looking at just 97 billion.
Okay.
If not for this new target, the 80% or the 85%, success participation wouldn't have been reached. Okay. Because if you compare the 82 or 83 billion cedis to 137, it's so different.
All right. Let's bring in Professor Bokping, who is an economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Professor Bokping is on the line with us now. Prof, grateful that you could join us. What will be the impact of this DDEP on businesses in the country, especially banks?
Well, the impact is going to be massive. Thank you very much. Good evening. The impact is going to be, and it will be felt in the next 2 decades. Why are we saying so? If you look at the maturity profile of the new bond, some will mature 2038. That's very long. That tells you how long this pain will stay with us. The pain will be less depending on the actions government will take, especially this year and the next year, in terms of they issuing new bonds outside the ones that have been exchanged for the old one. If you look at the impact of the domestic debt exchange on the books of the banks alone, put together from the 23 banks, they are giving up in excess of 40 billion cedis. That is huge. What that means is that the available liquidity to the banks, which would have enabled them to lend to individuals and businesses, will no longer be available. So it's going to affect lending to private sector and households. That would also have implications for business expansion. Beyond that, if you look at the entire financial sector, with this domestic debt exchange, cumulatively, in the next 15 years, they are losing in excess of 100 billion cumulatively. That has implications for business expansion. That has implications for household consumption and planning. Now, if government doesn't take the right steps as quickly as possible in assuring individual bondholders, pensioners, that their bonds will be honored, it will further heighten the uncertainty in our financial sector and the economy as a whole. That is actually not what we need right now. We need stability. We need to build forward better, inclusively. Why are we saying so? Because with this domestic debt system, it essentially undermines confidence in our financial sector. How do you build back? How do we build forward better? So there has to be greater clarity on the position of government with respect to individual bondholders who did not tender their bond. It's very important. And I think that the statement the ministry issued and making it conditional actually doesn't help. Why? Because government did not set out to achieve 100% tendering. No. Government set a target of 80%. That has been achieved. Let's move on. Let's build confidence in our financial sector. Let's build confidence in our economy, and then let's move forward. If you look at some of the banks, the impact of it makes them vulnerable, and some financial institutions could easily become a target for acquisition because they actually don't have a strong balance sheet as we speak. Okay. Beyond that, if you look at the fact that this also has implications for the revenue target for GRA, because the financial sector has been one of the major tax-paying sectors to our revenue envelope.
Okay.
If you look at the losses that the financial institutions are accommodating in their books, chances are that they may not be able to declare profit, and therefore it would affect tax revenue to GRA. At the end of the day, there's a high possibility that the capital market may not be restored immediately, and therefore the asset management subsector of the financial sector could be impacted. It may result in job losses. Okay. Now, in terms of expansion, you know that businesses are not, people don't go into business to create jobs. They go into business to create value. It's only when they see the need to expand value creation, expand their businesses, that jobs are created. So this will also have implications for job creation in the economy. Government itself has been looking forward to this, and that is why in the 2023 budget, government is forecasting a lower GDP growth for this year compared to last year. And actually, Ghana's GDP growth in 2023 is the lowest in the sub-region, at 2.8%. Okay, so what that means is that the fiscal consolidation measures alone envisaged in the 2023 budget, coupled with the domestic debt exchange and the frictions that are going to go through the economy within the next 2 years or so, will have implications for growth in the immediate. and would have implication for employment generation in the immediate. If you look at the 2023 budget itself, government had indicated that actually there will be no recruitment in the public sector this year. So if the state itself doesn't want to recruit, how do you expect the private sector to recruit when you have applied a haircut, a deeper one, like we are seeing right now?
Okay, interesting. I'm grateful to you, Prof, for joining us with this perspective. Now, Kofi, government is also assuring bondholders that we will be able to honor our promise to you when your bonds mature. What do we know of that? What do we know of government's book such that people can believe that indeed government can honor that?
Well, I'm glad Prof touched on revenue. So to be able to pay someone that you're owing, you should know how much you earn or how much you generate as income. So if you look at this table on the touch screen, government is projecting to raise revenues and grants is around 143.9 billion cedis. Now, of this revenues and grant that will be raising in 2023, I'm going to consider only 3 key expenditure items.
Okay.
And we'll see how they actually wipe away a majority of this revenue. So if you look at compensation of employees, we are talking about wages and salaries, it's around 44 billion, over 44 billion Ghana cedis. Interest payment on loans, not even amortization or principals, just the interest on the loans you've taken, 52.55 billion cedis. Clearance of arrears from previous years is around 14.44 billion cedis. If you add these 3 line items, Brace, it's around 111.98 billion cedis.
Wow.
Now you want to raise 143 billion cedis, but just 3 components from your budget or your expenditure is taking away 111 billion cedis. You are left with just 31.9 billion cedis as a country to spend on other things like subsidies, fuel subsidies, like goods and services,
fertilizer subsidies as well,
like capital expenditure. You are left with just 31.9 billion cedis. And you ask yourself, does government have that fiscal space to even pay those that they've assured that they are going to pay the coupon rate? So let's move to the next table, and you also see that. Let's come to just domestic. What we saw was domestic and then external. Now we're talking about the domestic debt exchange program, so it's important to highlight the domestic. Domestic debt obligation for 2023. Maturing bonds. If you look at Dachi bonds, Government of Ghana bonds, ESLA bonds. Maturing bonds for 2023 alone is 31.31 billion cedis. Interest on all government debt is the same 31.13 billion. If you add the 2 plus compensation of employees, we are looking at 107 billion cedis. And if you subtract it from how much we raised the entire 2023, we'll be left with 35.4 billion cedis as a country.
We need to take care of international
obligations
obligations as well.
We're not even talking about external debt obligations. We're not even talking about capital expenditure. We're not even talking about compensation. We're not even talking about subsidies. And just your domestic debt operation or debt obligation plus your compensation of employees is taking away a chunk of the revenue you want to generate. So we ask the question, does government really have the fiscal space? This is a budget. You can promise that you pay, but at the end of the day, we ask the question, can government really make that actual expenditure?
Okay, interesting. Very revealing data they put together by Isaac Ofieje from our research. That's great for now. Sam.